Well, here we are in session 51 of our series in Mark, looking at verses, or chapter 10, verses 32, 33, and 34, a short description, but more detailed than previously, his third passion description. We're going to go again with Jesus describing his passion. As we said, it's the third time that he's done so. Now, though, it's just, a month away maybe, or even less, that it's actually going to take place, because they are about to cross over from Perea back into Israel at Jericho, and then they will make the 15, 17, 18-mile trip from Jericho to Jerusalem. So it's a time that things are beginning to wind down. Things are beginning to get tough come crunch time. But this is the third time that we've taken a look. This time I think we're going to take a look at all three of the descriptions and compare them. See what he has told them and what they have yet to learn. And the answer is they have most of everything left to return. There are some things they know. There's less that they understand. The one thing we do know they understand at this time is that he is going to Jerusalem as Messiah. So let's go back and look at the first time Jesus described his passion to them. Back in Mark 8, 31 through 33. These all are like 3 or 4 verse segments. So Mark 8, 31 through 33. And he, Jesus, began to teach them, that's the 12, that the Son of Man, the scripture doesn't say must suffer many things. That's the first thing he's telling them. Look, when he told them this back in Mark 8, I am going to suffer many things. He doesn't describe it, but he said it's going to happen. And be rejected by the elders and chief priests and the scribes. He said the religious leaders in the Sanhedrin are going to reject me. And be killed. I'm going to be killed. Actually, that killing is an execution. And finally, after 3 days, rise again. So what does he say? I'm looking at suffering. I'm looking at rejection. I'm looking at assassination or execution. And I'm looking at rising 3 days later. Only 4 general statements. Again, suffer, be rejected by the religious leaders, be killed, and rise 3 days later. So this was a fairly quick and general introduction to the idea of his week of passion. This was at the point when Peter stuck his foot in his mouth and ended up being called Satan, when he told Jesus, no, those 4 things aren't going to happen to you. You're the Messiah. You're the Son of God. And he had to be told to close his mouth because he didn't know what he was talking about. So here's the second time. This was in 9, verses 31 through 32, another 3-verse segment where he redescribes, or describes again, probably a better way to say it, his passion that's upcoming. These early times may have been several months before the passion was to occur. But this third time is going to be probably just less than a month, but we don't know for sure. 9:31 through 32. For he was teaching his disciples and telling them, the Son of Man is to be delivered into the hands of men. Okay, so there's a new thing. The Son of Man is going to be betrayed to others. And the others, and they will kill him. He's going to be betrayed. The ones to whom he's being betrayed will kill him. And when he has been killed, he will rise 3 days later. So this is a bit different. He only says 3 things. Doesn't talk about the persecution. He says, somebody's going to betray me. He's going to betray me to some men. Those men will kill me. I will arise 4 days later. But they didn't understand that statement. And remember the oddity, they were afraid to ask him because he had just dressed Peter down not too much before that. So, delivered into the hands of men conveys the notion of betrayal. So, what did we have this time? Betrayed to some authority, killed by that authority, and rise 3 days later. Well, this second passion statement was a bit more general than the first one, but with the notion of betrayal introduced as the new factor. And now, what about the third? Let's take a look at it in Mark 10, verses 32 through 34. And they were on the road going up to Jerusalem. At this time, they're still not in Israel, I don't think. I think they're in Perea on the east side of the Jordan. But they're headed to Jerusalem, and the Jews always spoke about going up to Jerusalem because Jerusalem was higher than most places were. But they just generally spoke, I'm going to go up to Jerusalem. Remember, it was essentially the capital, so it would be the big place. And Jesus was walking on ahead of them. So as they're walking, Jesus is out front. That's typical of where you would find the rabbi as he was teaching his disciples. He'd be leading them. And they, that must be the 12, were amazed. And those who followed were fearful. So we've got a second group beyond the 12 apostles or the 12 disciples or the 12 of the inner group, whatever you want to call them. And beyond that, there were others, probably pilgrims, headed to Jerusalem for the Passover. Maybe some of them were following Jesus specifically. Maybe some of them were simply moving in that direction. But the 12 were amazed. The 12, those others who were following, were somewhat fearful. We don't know exactly why the 12 were amazed and the other were fearful. But evidently there was some kind of sense that something was happening, or about to happen, or was going to happen. So again, Jesus took the 12 aside and began to tell them what was going to happen to him once they got to Jerusalem, saying, Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and, here we start now, the Son of Man will be delivered to the chief priests and the scribes. So he's going to be betrayed. This time the betrayal is clearly betrayal to the Sanhedrin, not to just anybody that's around. But he's going to be betrayed to the Sanhedrin. And remember, it is to the scribes and Pharisees that Judas did go. And they, that is the Sanhedrin, will condemn him to death. So it's the Sanhedrin that calls for the death penalty. That's new too. And will deliver him to the Gentiles. Remember, before he just said going to be handed over to some men. Well, now we know that those men are Gentiles, not Jews. Actually, they are Romans. And verse 34, and they, the Gentiles, or the Romans, will mock him and spit on him and scourge him and kill him. So now we've gotten back to the kill, which is always there, but we got the three spit upon and scourged as two of the specific persecution types. I'm sorry, the third one was mocked. So he's going to be mocked, spit upon, and scourged in the form of a persecution, part of the terror. And 3 days later he will rise again. So, what do we have? We have again, Jesus is going to Jerusalem to die and rise 3 days later. That's apparent in all three descriptions. But we have persecutions described in a little bit more detail here. Mock, spit, scourge, and the scourging, of course, was almost to his death. So we got that described from the first time that he told them about this Passion Week. So they're going to, and this time another new thing, he's actually going to be given a death penalty, and it's going to be drawn up by the Sanhedrin and posed to the Romans when he's turned over. So this is the most detailed of all of the three, and includes everything that was in any of the three, which you would suspect if it's the most detailed. So what do we have again? 6 specifics. Betrayal, Sanhedrin, sentence of death, handed over to the Romans, the Gentiles, mocked, spit on, and scourged in part of persecutions, killed, or sufferings at least, if not persecution, killed, rise in 3 days. 1, betrayal. 2, sentence of death. 3, handed over to the Romans. 4, mocked, suffered. Now 5, killed. 6, rise. So notice so far Mark has never used the word crucify. Matthew did, though. Matthew 20, verse 19. Matthew says, and they will deliver him to the Gentiles to mock and scourge and crucify him, and on the 3rd day he'll be raised up. So Matthew has used the word crucify, which would mean the Gentiles are going to be Romans. This description that we just read in Mark is the most complete, but the 12 still didn't get it, according to Luke, who wrote this in this section. And they understood, the 12, understood none of these things, those things spoken of from the Passion, and this saying was hid from them. What Christ told them was going to happen didn't make sense to them. They did not comprehend the things that were said. So even at this very late date, within a month of his death, probably, and maybe well within a month of his death, they still don't get it. Again, as Jesus played out this hard mission and his destiny, he knew what was coming. The disciples would not fully understand until his ascension and the soon-to-follow Pentecost event. So it's even now in the Gospels, the 12 are not going to get it. They're going to be told more in Acts, in the introductory part of Acts, and they will learn more on the day of Pentecost. Again, Jesus spoke of these matters plainly and openly, and he opened the Passion event slowly for them, keeps adding a bit, but they did not get it. Now, there are several points in this third description of the Passion. They were on the road to Jerusalem, but probably in Perea, headed toward Jericho. Jesus was out in the lead as rabbi. There were two groups of people following, the 12 and the others who were likely pilgrims headed for Jerusalem and the Pentecost festival. How many were following Jesus as a disciple? We don't know. The 12 were amazed, probably at the scene around them or what they believed was going to happen as Jesus exhibited steadfast determination to meet his destiny. Luke 9:51, 9:51. And it came about when the days were approaching for his ascension that he resolutely set his face to go to Jerusalem. He's describing the fact that Jesus had his mind made up. He was going to do it. He was going to go through it. His mind was set in meeting what was to come. But the others were afraid of what we're not told, but the scene could have been chaotic and suspenseful. And we're still working on those things, folks. Well, that Jerusalem is the destination of where this will all take place. It's now out in the open. Everyone now knows whatever's going to happen is going to happen in Jerusalem. Think of what Jews who knew their Bible could have understood about what was about to happen. Look at Isaiah 52, and I'm going to read a chapter and a half here. So it's going to take us a while. We'll wind it up as soon as I get from the end. But this is Isaiah's prophetic description of the Messiah, starting in 52:13 and read through chapter 53. So half of chapter 52 and all of chapter 53. I'll try not to screw it up too badly. Behold, my servant, that's Jesus, will prosper. He will be high and lifted up and greatly exalted. It doesn't sound like his passion, does it? Just as many were astonished at you, my people, so his appearance, Jesus' appearance, was marred more than any man, and his form more than the sons of men. In other words, he wasn't really recognizable as a human being. He was so marred through the sufferings. Thus he will sprinkle many nations. Kings will shut their mouths on account of him. For what had not been told them, they will see. And what they had not heard, they will understand. There are going to be those who do get this picture. 53, chapter 53, beginning in verse 1. Who has believed our message? Isaiah said, I've been giving this out for some time. And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? And this is all the Lord's work. For he grew, this is Jesus again, grew up before him, God, like a tender shoot, and like a root out of parched ground. He has no stately form or majesty. You ever seen something that springs up from a bird dropping, but it's not tended or tilled? It does not look with the quality that the plant should proffer. That we should look upon, he has no stately form or majesty that we should look at on him, nor appearance that we should be attracted to him. We're not attracted to this servant because of anything seeable in him, because he's beaten. He does not look reasonable. He doesn't even look human, but yet we stand there and do look at him. He was despised and forsaken of men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, and like one from whom men hide their face. People see someone who does not look human, they don't want to look at him. He was despised, and we did not esteem him. We had no attraction to him, period. Surely our griefs he himself bore. We wanted no part of him. Most did not want a part of him, but he took their griefs. Translation, sin. And our sorrows he carried, yet we as ourselves esteemed him stricken. His being stricken was a pleasant, or not necessarily pleasant, but it was proper as far as we were concerned. Smitten of God and afflicted, assuming by God. But he was pierced through for our transgressions, not his own. He was crushed for our iniquities, not his own. And by his scourging we were healed. All of us, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way, but the Lord has caused the iniquity of us all to fall on him, Jesus, the servant, the Messiah. Verse 7, that he was oppressed and he was afflicted for us with our transgressions, yet he did not open his mouth. He didn't beg off. And like a lamb that's led to slaughter, and like a sheep that is silent before its shearers, so he did not open his mouth. He never made any attempt to escape this destiny. Verse 8, by oppression and judgment he was taken away. It wasn't fair. It wasn't just. He was taken away to be oppressed and judged. And as for his generation, who considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living. He was killed. For the transgression of my people, he wasn't killed because of himself or anything he had done. It was for the transgression of God's people, to whom the stroke was due. In other words, whatever he suffered, we should have suffered. Verse 9, his grave was assigned with wicked men, which would have been the valley of Hinnom, where the burning, never-ending, never-dying out flame consumed the garbage there. Yet he was assigned to death with the wicked. And if Joseph of Arimathea had not stepped in, that's where Jesus would have been buried. Yet he was with a rich man in his death. He was buried in Joseph's personal tomb. Because he had done no violence, nor was there any deceit in his mouth. God wasn't going to let him be buried and burned in Hinnom, which we take as one of the descriptions of hell, metaphorically at least. But the Lord was pleased to crush him. Yahweh, God, the Father, was pleased to crush his Son, putting him to grief if he would render himself as a guilt offering. For he will see his offspring, those who believe him. He will prolong his days. He ain't going to stay dead. And the good pleasure of Yahweh will prosper in his hand. The Father will reward him. As a result of the anguish of his soul, his earthly soul during the incarnation, he will see it, all of what we've described, and he will be satisfied. By his knowledge, the righteous one, my servant, will justify the many, all of those who are saved, as he will bear their iniquities. This is 400 years before this happened, folks. And finally, verse 12, therefore I will allot him a portion with the great, and he will divide the booty with the strong, because he poured out himself to death, and he was numbered with the transgressors. He accepted their sin, and yet he himself bore the sin of many, not just one or two, many, and interceded for those transgressors. And it's either 1st or 2nd Timothy, 2:15 or something, I forget. Paul says that there is one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. So after his ascension, Christ took on the role of standing between us and God and speaking on our behalf for our sake. Well, okay, enough for this. Next time we're going to see how the ambition of James and John plays out. Just think, Jesus has just got through telling him everything what was going to happen. We just read that in the Isaiah 52 and 53, what that entailed. Next time, we're going to see how James and John responded to that. Can you guess? Probably you know the story, so you may. But one commentator has put it this way: one can be full of zeal and righteous desire and still have personal ambition that is not full of zeal and desire. You can be zealous for God, you can do all the things that are righteousness, and yet you can have a personal ambition that does not fill